Chapter 73. The torture victim had quite the grip. Mechanical screeching filled the tunnel as the empty passenger train hurtled toward the old Time Lord in the blue suit. Mr. Blue had been trying to loosen himself for several moments now, attempting to drag himself away. The grind of brakeless metal wheels on bare metal track drowned out the shouting of his companions. The elderly Time Lord looked down at his wrist, firmly clamped in the vice-like grip of his plastic rubber alien friend, made to appear as some horror film character. Further down, he noticed his own feet were located in the middle of the tracks. Well then, according to the brief mental calculations, the train should be arriving in 3.5 seconds. "Only one thing for it," Mr. Blue muttered. He sighed and went slack, releasing for just a fraction of a moment. The plastic monster became unbalanced due to the sudden lack of resistance and stumbled back. The train drew closer. Mr. Blue instantly took advantage of his opponent's lack of balance, throwing himself fully backward, away from the tracks as the torture victim, having a strong hold on the Time Lord's wrist, was yanked forward into the path of the train. Tiny Tot Terror Train collided with the possessed plastic alien horror decoration. Formerly aggressor, now the torture victim, flew apart as if detonated, sending mannequin limbs and a plastic head flying through the cramped, dark tunnel with an excessively loud pop, which echoed around Mr. Blue and his friends. With a horrendous screech, the train stopped ahead of Mr. Blue at the platform where Sully and D3 stood, stunned. "I'm going to go ahead and assume that our rubber buddies won't allow us to leave the way we came," Mr. Blue stated as he sat down, knees to chest, in the front car. "We haven't tried," Sully implored. D3 immediately sat down in the empty kid's car behind the Time Lord. "Oh, what is this, lass?" Sully asked. "You can't be serious. You're going to follow this madman into the rest of the tunnel of horror?" D3 glanced over at the remaining mannequins. The Dracula and the generic werewolf, both of which immediately began stalking toward the kiddie train, as if in an answer to Sully's question. "Oh!" The retired Commodore nodded. Sully promptly tried to stuff himself into one of the tiny passenger cars, yet it screeched forward before he was ready, knocking him off balance, causing the retired Commodore to faceplant straight down into the seat, where his rear end should have landed. "All set?" Mr. Blue asked. There were muffled vagaries from Sully's car. The train began to speed away with the two horror film staples in hot pursuit. D3 reached up and gripped the old Time Lord's wrist, noting that the hand of the torture victim had remained clamped tightly. "Nice bracelet, I guess," she commented absently. Mr. Blue didn't acknowledge, as he was busy trying his damnedest to steer the Tiny Tot train. This was not really meant to be something that a passenger in the front car could accomplish, yet he continued to try, especially when he saw more horror show characters emerge. Mr. Blue encouraged D3, "Lean as hard as you can." Frankenstein's monster and his zombie joined with Dracula and the werewolf in the pursuit down the dark and cramped tunnel of horror. D3 was screaming. The train began to move much faster. Plastic monsters continued to gain speed, getting faster, nearing the last train car, which held the upside-down retired Commodore. The fake rubber werewolf was able to get close enough to grip Sully's car as he righted himself. Sully shouted, "We need to go bloody faster!" as the retired Commodore punched the werewolf in the face. This action did little but hurt Sully's knuckles. Mr. Blue yelled behind him to the others, "Hold on!" D3 shouted back, "Why do you always have to say that when there's nothing to hold on to?" Instead of answering, the Time Lord suddenly leaped up into the air and slammed his feet into the floorboards of the tiny train car. Rear wheels skipped up above the tracks for a split second. Mr. Blue was trying to derail them. "And 3, 2, 1. The Time Lord counted down. D3 and Sully followed his lead. Both of them jumped and landed with a heavy enough impact to cause the entire tiny train to skip off of the tracks. There were no customers inside of Monroe's Tavern. Nicholas Baker suddenly grabbed his shotgun from behind the bar, somehow feeling that, instinctively, things were about to go askew. Lately, he'd had these intuitions, yet could not explain why. He walked in front of Monroe's Tavern, the bar he'd set up with his friend Rye as a cover for their clandestine unit station monitor duties. Operation Timepiece. Out of nowhere, there was a cacophony, a horrendous screeching sound as a terrible, twisted metallic noise, followed by a spectacular crash. Nicholas watched as the kid's scary train ride came smashing through the back wall of his tiny man-made cave. The train exploded outward and landed, smashing into 3 pieces, which contained 2 old men and a young woman. Assuming they must be terrified, Nicholas saw the creatures emerging in pursuit after them. His eyes grew wide as saucers as he watched a werewolf, Dracula, a zombie, and Frankenstein's monster come lumbering through the massive hole in the cave structure. The old man in blue was desperately trying to wake his 2 friends. Unfortunately, they were out cold. They'd experienced trauma to the head in the crash. Nicholas stared down at the strangers for a moment, then looked up at the false rubber and plastic monsters, soon to overtake them. Nicholas Baker sighed, adjusting his glasses, and stepped forward. He was tall and stocky, with an equal measure of muscle and intelligence. Deftly, he slid the cocking mechanism of his shotgun, and in 4 rapid succession blasts, the horror decoration monsters were left as headless mannequins. Mr. Blue stood, adjusting his azure tie, as he made his way to Nicholas. "Thank you!" The Time Lord vigorously gripped and shook Nicholas's hand. "My name is Capezio Neko Vales Traveler. These are my friends, Mr. Blue looked down at D3 and Sully. "She's knocked out, and he's unconscious." Nicholas nodded. "I'm Nicholas Baker. I run the tavern. Count yourself lucky, stranger. Why is that?" Nicholas peered at Mr. Blue. "Last visitors weren't so lucky. Because of these things?" Nicholas nodded. "Precisely. I hate autons.